Hello everybody, it's the Historical Gamer once again, and today is the first part of my look at War in the Pacific Admirals Edition with my online multiplayer play-by-email game against XTRG. This video is going to be more of a summary of some of my initial plans as the Allies. I'm not going to do what he did and have like 8 hours plus of my first turn, but I do want to talk about some of the key things that I plan to accomplish or try to accomplish early in the war. Now, we are playing the December 7th turn of War in the Pacific Admirals Edition, which means that XTRG was able to go into the game and sort of modify his December 7th orders from reality. We do have some requirements. He is required to attack Pearl Harbor. I am not allowed to do a massive evacuation of Pearl Harbor. In fact, I'm keeping all of my ships at Pearl Harbor in the spirit of good and fair play. I'm not doing a massive evacuation of aircraft, other fields, or anything like that. Similarly, in the Philippines, I'm not just going to move everybody out of Clark Field before the first turn's bombing raids. Essentially, we're going to try and play it somewhat close to the vest and close to a historical first turn, or at least I am. That's kind of that. Now, with that being said, that doesn't mean I'm not doing anything. So one of the things that I'm doing is the game assumes Patani and Singora already have Japanese troops that are coming ashore there. I believe there will be another landing at Kotobaru. But at the end of the day, given that reality, I think it's fair for me to start withdrawing British troops south on the Malay Peninsula. So one of the key things that I plan to do is to set up a defensive position at Malacca and trying to block the Japanese drive south on Singapore. If that is flanked, if he lands at Mersing or if he lands at Johor Bahru, then we'll fall back accordingly. Additionally, I'm not going to have Force Z drive north and get itself killed by enemy aircraft. I am actually going to have them fall back to Surabaya, or however you pronounce that, in the Dutch East Indies. But I am going to have them swing to the east a little bit, south of the island of Groot, Natonia. I'm hoping maybe he's going to send some transports to try and get a quick swing at Kuching or Sambas or some of these positions here on the northern island of Burma. So I'm going to swing my vessels wide right, and then we'll move them south. I think that should keep them out of the worst of the torpedo bomber ranges, although I do know they have quite the range. So theoretically, I may still end up losing renown and repulse, but we'll at least try it this way to be a little bit more conservative than historically was the case. Meanwhile, other than that, just sort of evacuating troops on the Malay Peninsula back as part of my first turn. Additionally, one of the other things that I'm going to be doing basically right away is getting everything I can out of Hong Kong. We know that position is doomed to fall, so we're actually pulling out the destroyers and the cargo ships and everything except for the PT boats, which do have to remain based on our PT boat house rules, so they're going to fall back here to Surabaya. As well as the Philippines. So I'm going to be evacuating naval forces. Now, some of these are already underway. The Boise, for example, is already in the process of falling back to Balakapin, or I'm not even... You guys, I might need some help on this in this series with pronunciations, because I'm not great at them. But we're going to have our surface vessels in the Philippines fall back here to the southern tip of Borneo, and sort of form sort of a couple of strike packages. So the intent here is to have the bulk of the British forces fall back to the Dutch East Indies, where we're going to regroup and form, hopefully, a powerful striking arm so that we can launch sorties and raids against the Japanese as they begin to expand further south. Similarly, with our forces in the Philippines, I plan to fall them back here to the southern tip of Borneo, where they will also launch strikes against enemy vessels coming in on the Dutch East Indies to the east. So we should sort of have two main wings where we're going to send out vessels. Now, the strategy behind that is going to be a little bit almost commerce rady. The intent is going to be having individual cruisers in task forces of 1 or 2 that will be less likely to be spotted by enemy air cover, which will allow us to slash at these enemy troop convoys, which I'm hoping, given THG, I am THG, given XTRG's inexperience, he's played a little bit of War in the Pacific, but never against a human. Hopefully, given his inexperience with the game, he will make some similar mistakes to what I made when I first played my first PBEM, and I'm by no means an expert, but I played one or two, never past sort of early 1942, and never with the level of detail or rigor necessary to be successful. But with that being said, I'm hoping he'll do what I did and not escort his troop convoys adequately so that individual cruisers or destroyers can have some success. And actually, there was some historical precedence to this gameplay tactic during the invasion of Java, or shortly before. I think it was actually when the Japanese were landing on the island of Sumatra. The Americans sent 3 destroyers at a Japanese anchorage, and they sank multiple Japanese transports. So they snuck into the harbor, and they torpedoed these transports at harbor, and it was one of the biggest successes early in the war for the Allied naval vessels. And I'm hoping we can replicate that on a bit of a grander scale. Imagine that being done with battleships, and you'll see where my hopes are going to lie. So the intent there is going to be to fall back our surface vessels, the USS Houston, a heavy cruiser, the light cruiser Boise, the destroyers that are located in Manila. There's already several destroyers and a light cruiser here, the Marblehead and several other 4-stack destroyers also falling back. And also, in addition to doing that, the intent is to use up some of these resources. So the key thing for the Japanese economy long term is trying to establish bases in these areas without doing too much damage to the local oil industry. Well, there's a lot of oil and fuel that will be stored here. There's already 37,000 here on this tip of Borneo, and there likely will be more, as I believe resources flow in there from further in the north. Anyway, I'm going to have to play around. I know there's a program that XTRG uses to make everything show up. The industry line down here isn't showing up on the map. Doesn't matter as much for the Allied player. There's not as much industry to manage, but something to keep in mind. So anyway, my plans in short, sort of in the Dutch East Indies, is to form 2 powerful task forces near Balkapin and Surabaya in the Dutch East Indies, and sort of use them as strike forces at the enemy as they sort of advance, while also falling troops back towards Singapore. And then on Luzon, I intend to fall troops back initially toward a line of Clark Field and Manila, while sucking as many resources into Bataan as I can, and starting to build up fortifications in Bataan, as well as Clark Field and in Manila. The intent is to use these locations as defensive points with which to sort of anchor a line on that hopefully can withstand enemy assaults into the beginning of next year, and if not further. Obviously that's the ideal. In China, meanwhile, I'm going to take a more aggressive role in China. So there's a lot of Chinese forces that are spread out all over this large country. China is often ignored in the World War II discussion, but really it was pivotal. It was the Eastern Front of Japan and by Eastern I mean comparable to like the German-Russian front in World War II. Not the massive maneuvers of that front, and not ultimately the decisive outcome of that front, or perhaps the Spanish ulcer for Napoleon is a better example. Just a massive sink of resources, and the Chinese fought splendidly against the Japanese in World War II, losing literally millions upon millions of soldiers and citizens in this struggle against Japan. And I intend to use them aggressively. So I'm going to consolidate this. There's a lot of troops that are all kind of scattered across the countryside, but kind of one of my key things here is I want to try and cut off the city of Hankow and the city of Xinjiang. These 2 cities here are linked by rail right now, but the Japanese are a little bit vulnerable in Xinjiang because they're essentially on an island. There's no link between the rail north. They can't get to Kaifeng because there's Chengchao, which is between them and us. So until the Japanese take the city, there is no rail link in the north. In the south, the only rail link is through Hankow. Now, even that is a little bit tenuous at best. There are road links toward the coast. There's a river link to the coast. But at the end of the day, if we can get troops right here in this hex, if we can get troops here and hold this position, we can effectively surround this city, which has some 5 Japanese units, multiple divisions of soldiers. We could force the surrender of 50,000 plus Japanese soldiers if we can take this city. And the key to taking this city is this hex right here, which will cut it off from supply from Hankow. That will dramatically weaken Japanese ability to project power and trying to advance deeper into China, and that is my objective. In addition to that, I'm going to launch an attack on Ichang. This is another Japanese city that's a little bit exposed. If we can take this one unit out to the south here, then we can hopefully more easily defeat them. I don't think we'd be able to surround and destroy the 2 enemy units up here, but we should at least be able to push them back and deal the Japanese a blow that is going to be tough for them to recover from. So if we can take these 2 cities, that should focus the majority of the Japanese attention in trying to regain those cities, or at least pause and regroup after those large-scale casualties. Additionally, I'm going to send 1 unit here to kind of harass the Japanese in the south. I'm not going to be able to do much against Canton, which has massive Japanese troops. Hong Kong will have massive Japanese troops soon as well. There's 9 units here driving on Hong Kong. But I can hopefully make them less efficient if I can get 1 Chinese unit here between the 2 cities, cut the rail link there, and focus the Japanese effort on trying to reestablish a coherent line of communications. And maybe, I mean, again, Canton's a port, so they're not going to be surrounded or destroyed, but at least focus their efforts on sort of regaining that territory and less on expanding into China. In addition to that, I'm going to pull some of these troops out here in the east back. I'm going to see if I can launch a counterattack on Nanqing. I'm not totally sure if that's feasible or not, but I'm at least going to concentrate forces in front of it to try and fix Japanese attention. And that's going to be kind of the watchword. So I'm going to concentrate up here in the north near Patao to try and drive the Japanese troops here in the north back a little bit. But really the main Chinese focus is going to be cutting off the city of Xinyang and trying to destroy the sizable Japanese force here, as well as retaking Yichang and going from there. So stopping the drive into central China via those efforts. In addition to that, I'm going to have to get the submarines out of Manila. I haven't started to do that yet. We may do one more setup turn as I get a little bit further into my actual turn, but I need to get the 27 submarines in Manila Bay out to start harassing the Japanese Navy as they start to embark on their naval conquest. Again, I'm going to leave Japan, or I'm going to leave Hawaii largely untouched, so that's going to be something that we'll focus on in a future video. On the East Coast, we're going to start setting up convoy routes and other things like that. So the intent will be really to get sort of a shuttle service going between the mainland, Hawaii, and Australia so that we can start building up our strength. Frankly, for an eventual counterattack that probably won't come for several months, but is still something that we need to start preparing for. In addition to that, I'm going to start building up some bases here in the south. Pago Pago is a good example. Suva in the Fiji area is another good example of islands that I plan to build up and make sort of as coaling stops or locations along the way to Australia that will both be fortified against Japanese attack and also act as potential staging areas depending how the conflict here in the Central Pacific or South Pacific play out. So that's sort of my goal there. Probably won't do a ton in and around Rabaul. Maybe I will try and hold this position. It's actually a little bit stronger than you think here. They've got a couple of decent battalions there. But if the Japanese land a large unit, like brigade size or better, it's going to be toast. And then really it's just going to be trying to hold the Japanese up. Batan's going to be the main one that we're going to really try and kind of hang on to at all costs. Singapore, the other one, those are going to be the two rocks of our defense to try and delay the Japanese from having these soldiers sort of released and available for other operations. So again, we'll see how that plays out while getting the submarines out and kicking. As far as our carriers are concerned, so we've got multiple aircraft carrier units at sea right now. We've got the USS Lexington, which is currently in the process of sailing just to the south of Wake Island. I am not going to do that. Let's go ahead and order it to run away. Let's go ahead and order it to Christmas Island here in the south, mainly just to get it away from the Japanese. A little bit ahistorical here, but I'm going to order that carrier force to fall back to Christmas Island. I'm going to go ahead and order the other carrier, which I believe is the Enterprise, but we'll have to take a look at that. We're going to fall them back a little bit further east. The intent here is not to actually link up and do anything. The intent here is just going to be... I can't do that, can I? Can't set a patch in the middle of the ocean as the friendly base, I guess. So I think what we'll do here is we'll go ahead and have this guy fall back to the east, southeast of Hawaii, and go that direction with Enterprise. The intent, again, is not to find the Japanese carrier fleet, but to avoid it. So we'll send them to different locations. Hopefully, if the Japanese do get aggressive and maybe go south, because again, our house rule does state that he's only allowed to attack Pearl Harbor once. While he's allowed to attack Pearl Harbor only once, there's nothing to prevent him from going on a carrier hunting spree and sending the KB or the Japanese carrier force to the south in an effort to try and find our carriers. So by falling back to Christmas Island right away, that hopefully gets us out of the Japanese carrier force's sort of target. I think we're actually going to go ahead and go with maximum speed to get them out of there, because the Japanese carriers actually get a massive boost turn 1. So if he is really trying to get out there and find me, I'm going to try and get the hell out of Dodge as fast as possible. If I can get south of Johnson Island for both of my flotillas before he's able to free his troops up and start looking elsewhere, then that may give me a better chance of escaping. At least that's the intent. Again, we're not going to touch the actual forces in Hawaii. We're going to let them take the punches as they will. And we'll probably start setting up some convoys here before the end of our first turn, to at least get some of that busy work out of the way. So in summary, the main focuses that I'm going to be working on here in my first turn, which again, I'm not going to show all the detail, but the main focus is going to be concentrating Chinese forces and launching attacks on this strip of land between Xinjiang and Hankow, hopefully to allow us to cut off the Japanese troops here in the north and destroy a sizable Japanese army, launching a counterattack against Yichang, harassing the troops in the south near Canton and Hong Kong, and then also just sort of strengthening our troops against any potential Japanese incursion, putting troops near Wuchang, sort of concentrating some troops over here, concentrating some troops near Nanjing to see if there's an ability to launch a counterattack there, and then in the Malay Peninsula, having our troops fall back a bit south toward the area of Malacca and potentially further south if he launches any amphibious assault to try and get around us. Additionally, in the Philippines, we're going to fall back to the Clark Field, Manila defensive line to act as a barrier between the Japanese and Bataan while we suck in as many of the resources of the Philippines into Bataan as we can and build up the fortifications there so that we can really build up a strong defensive position that will take the Japanese months to overcome. In the Dutch East Indies, not doing a lot with the infantry probably right away, but the intent will be to build 2 strong naval forces, one near Surabaya and one near the Balkapin area, where we can launch sorties against Japanese forces as they begin advancing throughout the region. Force Z will not launch its suicidal attack to the north. They may still die, but they're actually going to go east here to sort of cover Kuchang, and then they're going to move south to the Dutch East Indies if they survive that. The hope is that the Japanese level bombers are going to be searching closer to Kota Baru or Kutan, and they're not going to be searching the northern coast of Borneo. At least that's, again, the intent. We'll probably do one more video if I revise any of this before the actual first turn goes live, but that's my intent. Not doing anything in the Philippines or in Hawaii. We're falling our carriers back south ASAP. We're going to take some systems damage to do that, but that's fine. We're not going toe-to-toe with those carriers anytime soon anyway. And on the California coast, we're going to start building convoys and start hopefully getting logistics set up to support Australia. And I think that's about it. The one thing I haven't really figured out what I want to do with yet is Burma. So I do know I want to defend Burma, but I don't really know what the best way to do that is. So I'll probably start setting up a defensive line in India near Lado, along Koma, Impal, and then toward the coast. I'll start digging in there. But I also think it's really important to hold Burma and hold the town of Lashio and Mandalay. So they'll probably put a defensive line somewhere along here as well, because this is a roadway into China that provides valuable supply. I think it's like 6,000 supply per day, maybe it's 600 supply per day. But it's a large amount of supply that travels through the Burma Road into China and really is vital to keeping the Chinese army as a viable fighting force. So it's really important to try and hold Burma and hold this specific area in Burma as much as possible, because China will really suffer if you lose that defensive line. With that being said, that's about all I've got right now. I think we've got some reinforcements that may be coming to Singapore. We may divert them. We've got like a brigade of troops that are embarking somewhere over in India right now. I think maybe it's these guys. No, they're going. This Gurkha regiment's going to Rangoon. It's this task force, the 45th Indian and 44th Indian Brigades, are headed towards Singapore. We may repurpose or move them. I'm not sure. I really need to think what we're going to do in Burma and India. But at least for now, that's the plan. And no major evacuations. No cheapy evacuations of just pulling out small pieces of units so you can reconstitute them elsewhere. Hong Kong is doomed. We're just pulling out the naval forces there. So I think that's a good summary of my plans. I will probably post one more video that goes into a little bit more detail of a couple of the operations that I've actually planned and issued orders. I've started doing that in China already. You can see I've already got orders issued, for example, for the 30th China Corps to move southeast to try and cut off this town over here. We've also got these 2 Chinese corps that are going to be moving in there as well. So we've already got some orders issued, but I'll do one more recap video probably in the next couple of days as I finish my first turn up, and then after that we'll go ahead and play. I think what we'll do is we will play through the first turn, like we'll actually show you the battle results as they're coming through to give you a sense of how December 7th plays out, if it's similar to history or not. But that's enough of me rambling, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts below. Let me know your recommendations below. And until next time, this is the Historical Gamer saying thank you for watching, and I'm out.